This video contains spoilers for the following Need for Speed games. Seriously, it's been more than a decade since these first two released, so, I mean, if you haven't played them already, then where have you been? But then again, if Heat's your first game in the Need for Speed series, then welcome, and go and play Most Wanted and Carbon. Or at least watch a playthrough on YouTube, because getting them to work on a PC these days is really difficult, unless you have an Xbox 360 or a PS3 or something. Go play them, go watch them, whatever. Towards the end of Need for Speed Heat's story mode, the BMW M3 GTR is reintroduced into Need for Speed canon. And it's not just any M3 GTR, it's the M3 GTR, the very first one, the iconic one from the original Need for Speed Most Wanted from 2005. It's been 13 years since this car was last seen, and the very beginning of Need for Speed Carbon. But its mere presence in Palm City in 2019 poses a mysterious question, because the last we heard of it was that it was totaled. How did it get here in fully working condition 13 years after it was supposedly destroyed? This video aims to try and tell this car's story, speculatively. We cannot say for certain the true, full story of this car, but we can speculate on what happened to it over these 13 years. But to truly understand this car and its story, I think we have to go to the very beginning. And that is not the beginning of Most Wanted 2005, but instead the beginning of Need for Speed Carbon. Before the protagonist of Most Wanted and Carbon, the player, even had access to the M3 GTR. We go to that ill-fated race in Palmont City. Approximately 1 year before the events of Most Wanted 2005, this street race in Palmont City occurs between the player and the three bosses of the main Palmont City crews, Angie, Kenji, and Wolf. We can say for certain that this race happens earliest 2004, as Wolf's Aston Martin DB9 was only released in 2004. The race ends with a surprise police sting operation. The player's car is spared the kill switch attacks and makes their getaway, only to find that their prize money has been switched and is totally useless. At some point, they make their way back to their friend Darius, who lent us the car for the race. And he has this to say.
Look, between the heat and the cruise, you need to walk away. Take my car, go, get out of here.
The entire police department of Palmont is after the player, and the three crews believe that they were set up. Palmont is not a safe place for the player, and they leave, eventually finding their way to Rockport City in 2005. At some point between the events of the race and the very first moments of Most Wanted, they gain access to the M3 GTR. It's not known how. The car they left Palmont City in was the blue Supra that was originally Darius's. Perhaps the M3 was bought, maybe it was stolen, or perhaps it was won through a pink slip, and the Supra discarded, being far too hot to remain in. The fact is, by the time the player arrived in Rockport City, they had the M3 GTR under their belt, and it was already a decent racing car. After all, it was designed to race in the American Le Mans series. This is a fully fledged race car, not some street-modified M3. This was made for the track, and no doubt it is a good car. From here on in, the events of Most Wanted 2005 take place. The player starts winning race after race and catches the attention of Clarence Razor Callahan, the number 15 on the Rockport City blacklist. The most wanted street racers in the entire city. Initially thinking that you're just a nobody, he becomes genuinely interested when you beat his wingman, Bull, in his fully upgraded SLR McLaren. And he decides that he's going to get your car one way or another, even if that means cheating.
How's your car running?
Paper.
Of course, we don't need to recap the entirety of Most Wanted's story. Suffice to say, Razor steals your car, and you have to work your way up the blacklist to challenge him to win it back. With the police once again hot on your heels and the entire city too hot for you to remain, you have to leave once again. At least this time, you have your prize. Approximately 1 year passes. I mean, it has to have been at least a year, because by this time, Cross has lost his job with the Rockport Police Department, and now he's just a bounty hunter. And he's well known to Darius by this point, who still gets his name wrong, despite the time they've known each other. The M3 GTR has got the player this far, to the canyons on the outskirts of Palmont City, but this is where Cross catches up with them and commits seemingly the final act in the M3 GTR's life. After all the cutscenes, this is the message you get. Your car was totaled while escaping from Cross. Totaled. Not slightly damaged. Totaled. It is completely destroyed. The car you worked so hard for back in Rockport is now gone. Lost. Sent to the scrap heap. Or so we thought. Because lo and behold, it appears in Palm City 13 years later. Not damaged, not a scratch on it, except those that Mercer put on it. It's working. It's in perfect condition, maybe not as good as how Razor left it, but it's still working. It's a functional car, and fast enough to outrun police patrol cruisers. Perhaps it's just a replica, but it has the authentic 2005 Rockport plates, the correct rims, the correct paint job. There's no mistaking it. This is the iconic, most wanted M3 GTR, the one used by the Blacklist #1. The car once owned by the most wanted street racer in the entire country. There have been numerous facsimiles over the years, obviously, because this is such an iconic car, even in the Need for Speed universe. But the facsimiles never quite fully match up with the original. Maybe the base paint is wrong, maybe the rims are wrong, maybe it's just an M3 E46 that's made to look like an M3 GTR. But it isn't an M3 GTR, it's just a fake. A facsimile, a replica. It can never hope to be the real thing. So, what happened? What happened to the original M3 GTR that allowed it to be seen in Palm City 13 years after it was supposedly destroyed? This is where the speculation begins, as, of course, we don't know what happened. Unless Ghost makes up a story to tell us, all we've got is our imagination. So let's try and figure it out ourselves. So, 2006. On his return to Palmont City, the player, the protagonist, the most wanted, is cornered by Cross and the M3 crushed by steel pipes. We are told the car is totaled. And here is where things can diverge a little. Scenario number 1. The car really was totaled, at least for the time. But over the years, repair techniques have improved drastically, and the car was taken from the scrapyard, repaired, and brought up to its former glory, but without the Most Wanted's knowledge. Or perhaps with the Most Wanted's knowledge. Maybe the Most Wanted sold it, believing it was just a wreck. Maybe that's why they had a little bit of money in the first place. That was the salvage value of the M3 GTR, what it cost to scrap. But instead of being scrapped immediately, it just sat at the yard for years until someone figured out how to repair it and brought it back to its former glory and sold it on, eventually making its way to a street racer in Palm City who had the misfortune of being caught at night time and having the M3 GTR impounded, illegally impounded, to be sold on by the illegal police profiteering scheme. Such a rare car and such an iconic car, it would certainly fetch a fair price overseas. Scenario number 2. The car wasn't totaled, but whoever appraised the car in its condition immediately recognized it, immediately knew just what an icon it was, how valuable it was, and knew that it wasn't totally destroyed. It wasn't totaled, it wasn't a write-off, it was still functional and it could be repaired. And it would be a most profitable venture to sell it on. So they lied and said that the car was destroyed. It was a total loss. It was only worth maybe $10,000 in scrap value. A bargain. A small price to pay for repairing and selling on an invaluable car. And so that's what they did. They repaired it and sold it on. But they knew that if it resurfaced, the Most Wanted would find out. So it was kept under wraps, being sold on the black market, until it would eventually make its way into the hands of Frank Mercer's profiteering scheme. Mercer may have been a racketeer, but he was also a cop, and he knew that this car was way too hot to keep in the United States, and so he made arrangements to have it sold overseas, where it had no heat. It was not wanted overseas, except by someone who wanted to buy it. It was not a wanted vehicle. It was not a criminal vehicle overseas, just in the USA. And it was the perfect opportunity to make some big cash. Scenario number 3. Darius lied to the player and said that the M3 GTR was totaled, a loss, but instead took it into his own collection. Of course, he would still continue to use his Le Mans Quattro, but it was always nice to have a backup vehicle, especially one so coveted as this M3 GTR. Of course, when Darius found himself beaten by his former friend, the person he betrayed, he lost his Le Mans Quattro to the pink slip, and found himself having to use the M3 GTR. Exiled from Palmont, he used the M3 GTR as his own for years to come, until either he sold it on, or perhaps made his way to Palm City, where he was eventually busted by the Palm City police and the car impounded ready to be exported overseas for nefarious purposes. Those are the 3 theories that I've been able to come up with. Leave your own theories in the comments below. Theories all we have at this time. We may never know what happened to it, how it got here. Maybe it is indeed a replica. Maybe the original was destroyed. We will probably never know. But that doesn't mean we can't try and guess. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you found this video at the least interesting, if not entertaining. If you weren't interested, I guess leave a dislike. I mean, that's what they're there for. Until next time, good night.